an overview of cancer. Dr. Gopala, please share your screen.
Okay, thank you very much. Give me a second, I'll start.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah, we can see your screen, sir.
I will go with from the beginning.
You can put it on slideshow, sir.
I did it already. Okay. So good evening,
good.
everyone.
Better,
Thank you very much for joining us this evening and this morning for me, for us, whoever joined from the United States. Thank you, Dr. Amit, for collaboration to get started with this webinar. And thank you, Dr. Spiti Gupta, as well, for coordinating along with Dr. Amit Gupta. So this event is designed, obviously, as a non-expert focused webinar, just to celebrate the World Cancer Awareness Day. So first of all, I'd like to, I'm getting echo. Anybody else getting echo? Okay. Amit, can you check from your side any echo issue?
Sir, we have. Sir, we have started recording from our side.
You know, I'm getting echo. So.
Okay, now you should not be getting any echo. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, first of all, I like to congratulate all the survivors of cancer. You know, that's very important on this occasion of World Cancer Awareness Day, because they are the people who can tell us the stories. They are the people who can tell how successful the therapeutics that have been developed over the years. So thank you all for battling and showing us the hope, because the purpose of World Cancer Awareness Day is not to spread fear, but to spread hope. That's the theme for 2019 to 2021 campaign theme of World Cancer Awareness Day. I am and I will. The theme seeks to counter the negative attitude and fatalistic belief that nothing can be done about cancer, and instead promote how our personal actions can be powerful and impactful. So the powerful action that we are taking here today is to spread awareness, to discuss among experts, and to inform the non-experts about what's happening in the field of cancer. So, I mean, most of you know, obviously, the World Cancer Day was established in 2000, in this millennium, on 4th of February. Therefore, we continue to celebrate every year under the auspices of United Nations and UICC. So on this occasion, I just also want to introduce the organization we formed with the same spirit as the World Cancer Awareness Day was established. This is, again, scientist-driven and community-involved, scientists including the physicians as well, okay, obviously. So our mission is driven by committed professionals and fostered by the community. So we want to involve the community. This event is one such events where we like to involve our community. So we believe that our mission is to contribute to global efforts to prevent and cure cancer through research and education by fostering community participation and partnership. And we also believe that breakthrough in cancer, cure and cancer is possible by prevention, research, innovation in medicines and medicines that come through the clinics and laboratories and through education at all levels. Okay, so we have 4 pillars of hope, as we can see here. So for any cure to be long-lasting, And promising, we need research, we need awareness like we are doing today, and we need care like Dr. Amit and Guru do, and we need education like a lot of people, including many people on this panel here, do to spread education to students and to the communities. So cancer is not a new disease, of course, we know that. It's dated back in 16th century. And in the 18th century, Dr. James Ewing identified cancerous cells in the bones and muscles. Therefore, we know that this is called sarcoma, Ewing sarcoma, named after him. So significant advances in the area of cancer cure and care have happened in the past few decades, and cancer is preventable. Some cancers are even curable if we detect it early. This is the message of hope I want to give in my presentation today, and I'm sure everybody else will be speaking to the same extent. To the non-experts, of course, I just wanted to highlight all growth is not cancerous. Some growths can be benign, therefore they are not harmful. There are some growths which are malignant, the tumors. Therefore, when somebody notices any changes in the body, one should consult a doctor. That's advice. So in the next few slides, I just want to present to you the global scenario with and compare with the Indian scenario on incidence of cancer as well as death occurring due to cancer. Okay, as you can see in the screen here, if you compare to cancer incidence in year 2006 and cancer incidence in 2016, there's a drastic increase, many millions more in 2016 had been diagnosed with cancer, which is a 28% increase in global cancer cases. On the right side, if you see, there's a projection over a period from 2015 to 2035, there is going to be a drastic increase in the incidence as well as the deaths occurring due to cancer. Especially, it's predicted that unfortunately, India could be leading the incidence rates as well as the death rates by year 2035. That's the reason why events like this today, that we are doing today, to spread awareness in the community is essential so that we could prevent many of the cancers that occur in the Indian subcontinent. I highlighted one of the bar graphs here just to show that the cancer cases in less developed countries are going to be higher compared to in other countries. So you can, as you can see, the blue bar is very long in developing countries compared to the developed countries. I'm going to enumerate a few facts in this slide. Mainly, the cancer is second leading cause of death. We have seen that again. So important point to note here is 1/3 of deaths coming from cancer are due to 5 leading behavioral and dietary risk factors. For example, high body mass index, low fruit and vegetable intake, lack of physical activity, tobacco use, and alcohol use. Tobacco is the most important risk factor, responsible for 22% of cancer deaths around the world. And then hepatitis and other viral infections are responsible for 25%. I highlighted these two and then pointed with the arrow because these two are the risk factors that are very predominant in Indian subcontinent. And we'll see 1 or 2 slides to highlight that point again. The last point in this slide I want to make is the lack of proper data, proper registry to collect and collate data to make sure that we have a robust policy for prevention activities. That's, I think, is a key factor in the Indian subcontinent. Okay. So just to mention, any part of the body can be impacted with cancer. One can get cancer of any part of any organ of the body, except the heart is very rare to have a cancer. Heart cancers are very, very rare in the history of cancer. What are the most common cancers? I'm just going to show you 3 slides here that compare the left side, the Indian scenario, on the right side, global scenario. These slides are taken from UICC recent data published in 2020. As you can see, in India, breast cancer is accounting for 13.5% incidence. Overall, around the world, breast cancer also is the leading cancer. In the world, we have lung cancer as the next leading incidence, whereas in India, we have oral cavity, and including the lip and oral cavity is next one that we could talk about in the next few slides when we get there, coming from HPV and tobacco use. So if you compare males, incidence of cancer in the males in India versus the world, we again have lip and oral cavity cancers leading in India, whereas lung cancer is leading in the world. In the world, as you can see, we do not see the oral and lip cancers in any of the most prominent cancers in the world. So that's one point to make a note about. So if we compare incidence among females in India as well as in India with the world, again, breast cancer is common in both world as well as in India. And in India, cervical cancer is next, accounting for 18%, whereas cervical cancer is accounting for 6.5% in the rest of the world. This is another example that we have to take into account, which I presented earlier, the cause of HPV. HPV in India, the Indian subcontinent, is a major problem. Therefore, that's one thing to be noted about. Just I'm going to show a few points here. I will not deal with each point here, but I highlighted here what are the highest rates in India. I mean, I already told you it's 25% are unknown cases, but 10% of all cases occurring in India are due to lack of hygiene, causing the infections like HPV, etc. And tobacco accounts for 40%, which is the highest, which is preventable. And what I highlighted here is the gallbladder cancer. In parts of North India, like Dr. Amit and I are doing next week another webinar specifically on gallbladder, because gallbladder cancers are more in northeastern belt of India, as well as in some parts of Chile and maybe 1 or 2 other countries as well, but not as much in the rest of the world. We will learn next week what are the etiologies, etc., etc. Okay. So what causes cancer? This is an important question. Everybody in the general public is going to ask, what do I do? What do I not do to prevent cancer? I have given a lot of factors, etiological factors that could cause cancer. Not all of them are equally important. Not all of them may act alone. Some of them may act synergistically or additively. Therefore, occurrence of cancer is a process by which many cofactors confound with each other. Okay. For example, it could be genetics, it could be nutritional deficiency coming from poor diet, or weak immunity. We also will see a couple of slides that deal with immunity and cancer. You can see this is a very busy slide. I do not expect anyone to read, not even me. So just sufficient to say that this Bayes slide tells us that many cancers can be prevented. That's the take-home message from this thing. So what is cancer? I told you the highest, the incidence of cancers and cause of cancers and all the statistics so far, but fundamental question for the lay public, what is cancer? Cancer basically is a uncontrolled division of normal cells, uncontrolled proliferation of normal cells, followed by abnormalities coming from genetic mutations, epigenetic transformations, and immunological imbalances. That's the modern way of describing cancer. For example, it has been known for a long time and believed for a long time that genetics is the only cause of cancer. In the past few decades, we have learned that it's not only genetics, it is the epigenetic, that means beyond genetics, the programming part of the cell or cellular processes that control the genetics also contribute. We'll see in one of the slides. Additionally, as I mentioned, our immune system has very robust programming capabilities to control and to prevent cancers. Any deficiencies in this immunological programming can result in cancer. We have noticed it in the past few decades that is the case, and therapeutics have been developed successfully using this principle of immunological balance and triggering immune system to combat cancer. Okay, again, I already told everything that is there in these slides earlier. There are several etiologies: genetics, viral infections, chemical carcinogenesis, and physical carcinogenesis, etc. Okay, so this is the slide that I wanted to focus a few minutes to drive home the point I'm trying to make. That is the pathophysiological changes in cancer. As you can see on the top left of this slide, I have given several processes that can lead to damage to the genetic system: cellular metabolism, exposure to radiation, and exposure to ionizing radiation, chemicals, replication errors. Let's stop a minute and then deal with this topic. So when I said cellular metabolism, this is a very important topic because we think, most of the people think, in general public especially, that cancer is coming from outside sources, exogenous. But what is true is our own body is our own enemy that creates cancer or cancerous situations. For example, every minute, every second, our body is doing its activity and our cells are replicating, our cells in our body are replicating to generate daughter cells and etc. So we, in our body, will generate a lot of mutations that cause damage to the DNA that results in abnormal cellular growth, abnormal cells. As you can see on the right side, top right side, we have two factors. We have endogenous factors and exogenous factors. I misspoke. So endogenous factors cause damage to the DNA also. DNA damage in the cells as well. And damage the cells, they proliferate uncontrolled fashion. And that would lead to clonal expansion, resulting in mass formation and resulting in cancer, neoplasm. Okay, so when the damaged cell is responding to the stimulus of the damage, normal cells will react and then kill those cells that are abnormal, that are rendered abnormal, damage to the DNA. In certain cases or many cases, the cell is capable of repairing the damage to the DNA. The DNA damage repair is pivotal for maintaining the genomic stability. Anything that would compromise genomic stability leads to instability in the genome and would lead to cancer. If apoptosis process fails, that is one of the hallmarks of tumorigenesis. Okay, so as I have shown here, exogenous factors, diet is one of the things coming from diet. Some diets, like could cause mutations through damage to the cell and DNA. Okay, so on the left side, on the bottom left side, I've shown a figure, an image that shows epigenetic changes also are important. That means DNA genetic changes, that genetic programming has to be driven by some non-genetic programming to say the same thing in a lay terms. That is, we need transcription, we need translation, and we need replication for the cell to divide and then give daughter cells. This is very important process in which the signals for how to replicate, when to replicate, which are the two strands in the DNA is real DNA strand that needs to be followed and replicated without errors in the daughter cell DNA. That programming, that signaling mechanism is driven by epigenetic mechanisms. So we have learned recently in the past couple of decades that these epigenetic changes can be reversed by diet and nutrition, and therefore any abnormalities in the cell coming from epigenetic changes can be reversed and amenable to modifications through diet and nutrition. That's a very important take-home point from this slide. Okay. Also, as I have shown here by arrow, uncontrolled cell division can also be reversed. A step before that can also be reversed by functional immune systems. I'll show you in the next slide what I meant. As I mentioned, a couple of minutes ago, our immune system now in the normal fully functional immune system is capable of detecting abnormal cells and correcting the course and preventing those abnormal cells from becoming tumorigenic and spoiling the entire community of cells in the body. For example, there are two processes that occur in our immune system. One is editing the tumor cells. The other one is immune surveillance. These two are correlated, are related to each other. Okay, so the immune surveillance is a process in which our immune system monitors the function of the immunological processes in our body, whereby it recognizes and reacts against aberrant cells arising within the body. If there's a DNA damage, for example, that is causing abnormal cellular growth, our immune system recognizes it by T cells, special types of T cells, and kills those aberrant cells. That way, we never develop aberrant cells. Therefore, we will never develop tumorigenesis. That's very important. That's the reason why humans do not get cancers as much as we would get if our immune system does not function. I'm spending extra time on this slide because to give hope that by modifications to our diet, nutrition, and making behavioral changes, we could strengthen the immune system, thereby preventing cancers much more than what we believe so far, right? So the other part is the immunoediting. It's a process in which immune system again interacts with the tumor cells. Okay, so those of you could see the slides here. The immunoediting process, it actually does the same thing as I described so far. Wherever there is a abnormal cellular growth, it will trigger some mechanisms using our T cells, and then recognizing the aberrant cells and giving rise to some signals, cellular signals, and killing the aberrant cells, protecting us from carcinogenesis and tumorigenesis processes. I have shown another figure at the bottom of the slide, just to summarize the same thing. So we used to believe that genomic stability is the key factor or the only factor that would that is important to maintain, and anything that results in instability in our genome is resulting in cancer. The paradigm in cancer is not genetics alone. It is genetics, epigenetics, and immunological system that work hand in hand in preventing cancers in the normal human perfect system. And any compromise in any of these three systems would result in tumorigenesis and tumors. Again, I just summarize the success in this field, immunology and immunotherapies that occurred in recent years by showing this slide. The 2018 Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine went to two scientists who first discovered the process in which we could use, the scientists and physicians can use our own immune system to modify, to trigger our own immune system to prevent, to cure cancers. So the field is known immunotherapies. Okay, I'm showing you this to give you hope, to give patients and give general public the hope that as a result of all the work done by physicians and scientists in the past several decades, we have several drugs approved in recent times. The list is growing very much every day, in which several drugs are approved by FDA and other health agencies for the use of immunotherapies for cure of cancers.
Sorry to interrupt, sir. Can you expedite?
I'm done in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the last 2 slides that I have. So the cancer prevention, as we have been talking about, hand in hand, right? So the take-home message is here: take control of your health to reduce cancer risk, as we have shown. Early detection is a key step for the cure of cancer, and we have also seen that we have lifestyle changes that are amenable for prevention of cancers. In the next couple of talks, we will hear tobacco and cancer. We will hear HPV and cancer. We also will hear, especially important topic, early detection and prevention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I next invite Dr. Deepak Sonryal, who will be speaking on tobacco and cancer. Dr. Deepak, please share your screen. So Dr. Deepak Sonryal is a medical oncophysician at AIIMS Rishikesh.
Is it visible, sir?
Yes, please put it on the slideshow, Deepak.
Yes, sir. So on the occasion of World Cancer Day, I express my gratitude to the organizers for giving me this opportunity. And I have kept this lecture very simple, as it is a public awareness lecture. So in the next 15 minutes, I will be talking about history of tobacco, link between tobacco and cancer, something about tobacco products, then tobacco related cancers, then the behavioral use of tobacco and what are the trends worldwide and in our country, then what are the barriers against tobacco control and how to quit tobacco. So as we go for the history, the earliest evidence of cultivation and use of the tobacco goes back to before Christ era, where the Mayan community were the earliest to cultivate and use tobacco in Central and South America. And when Columbus in 1492 visited America, he found that the Native Americans were smoking rolls of dried up leaves of tobacco. Columbus and his men then themselves tried the narcotic effects of tobacco leaves, and they were very satisfied with tobacco. And they carried away with them some quantity of dried leaves as well as some seeds, and that is how tobacco was introduced to the rest of the world. Whereas in India, the Portuguese people were first to introduce tobacco here in 1605, and in Kera and Mehsana district, Gujarat, it was cultivated first of all, and then later spread to other part of India. And till 19th century, there was little known regarding the ill effects of tobacco, and everybody was very much pleased with the gratifying effects of tobacco, and that's how a cigarette tobacco research station was founded at Guntur in 1936. And because it was a heavily revenue generating industry, then a central tobacco committee was formed by the government of India in 1945. And then a tobacco research institute was found in Andhra Pradesh in 1947. And because nothing was known about the ill effects at that era, many of the major celebrities and involving doctors were actively promoting these tobaccos and smoking products. So how did we arrive at the link between tobacco and cancer? So it was way back in 1930 in Germany that, based on some German scientists' reports, Adolf Hitler conducted the most aggressive anti-smoking campaign in modern history. He was the first pioneer against use of tobacco, and he promoted healthy lifestyle. In fact, this was one of the good contributions of Adolf Hitler to the world. And then between 1922 to 1947, it was seen that in England, there was an unprecedented increase in lung cancers and other cancers. And Sir Richard Doll was the first pioneer epidemiologist who established that most of these patients were actually heavy smokers, and thus he concluded that there was some link between smoking and cancer. Then in USA, the General Surgeon Terry Luther, he addressed a press conference based on various evidences that there is a definite link between the smoking and ill health, and smoking is related to cancer. And for the first time in 1964 in January, this report was made public that the cigarette smoking is linked to cancer. So I will be briefly discussing about some tobacco products. So what we are seeing nowadays, we mainly see two types of tobacco products. One is known as the smokeless tobacco, which comes in the form of snuff or gutka, khani, pan masala, pouch, leaf or naswar, or we can see it in the form of smoked products like cigarette, or the so-called low tar cigarette or the filter cigarette, which are assumed to be of a safe product, but nothing is safe. They have equal carcinogenic potential. Then it can be smoked in the form of hookah, bidi or chilam, and nowadays e-cigarettes, which is known as electronic cigarettes. So whenever tobacco is consumed either in smokeless or smoked form, the consumer consumes it, the tar, water vapors, and nicotine. Tar is the main particulate matter which is cancerous, and nicotine which is addictive. And the International Agency for Research on Cancer has identified at least 72 carcinogens in tar, and the major ones includes nitrosamines, benzene, aromatic amines, and cadmium. So what are the tobacco-related cancers and how tobacco causes cancer? So as we have seen in previous presentation also, that smoking tobacco or consuming cigarette leads to some sort of inflammation, leading to malformation of DNA, which can then leads to abnormality in the cells, then abnormal proliferation, and all these leads to then cancer.
Dr. Deepak, please start your video also.
It's fine, sir?
Yes, okay.
Okay. So tobacco use causes cancer throughout the body, right from the head to toe, and these includes cancers of the oral cavity, pharynx, esophagus, cancer of the voice box, then cancer of the lung, bronchus, trachea, some sorts of blood cancers, liver cancers, kidney, ureter, stomach, pancreas, then in females like uterus, cancer of the cervix, then colorectal cancers and urinary bladder. So almost many of the cancers are related directly or indirectly to tobacco use. So even if a cancer patient continues to use tobacco even after the diagnosis of cancer, then there is a poor response to cancer treatment, often leading to treatment failure. There are higher chances of cancer coming back after cure. There are higher chances of developing a second cancer in the body, and there are always a higher chances of death. So let's come to some tobacco use behavior and trends. So this slide was previously also shared by Dr. Gopala. So as per Globocon 2020 data, as we are seeing that many cancers like colorectal cancer, lung cancer, cancer of the cervix, uteri, stomach, in females, they are linked with tobacco use, and in males like lung cancer, colorectal, stomach, liver, bladder, and esophagus are also related to use of tobacco. So it has been seen that in the last century, almost 10 crore of people died of tobacco related diseases, while the projection for 21st century is near 100 crores, and this is very alarming. And it has been estimated that every 1 out of 2 active smokers, so almost 50% of the smokers will develop cancer at some point of life. However, it is good that tobacco use is on decline in developing countries, while it's bad news that it is still rising in developing countries. So the trends from India are rather more alarming. So what we have data from the Global Adult Tobacco Survey conducted between 2016 and 17, and it has shown that India is the second largest tobacco producing nation in the world. We are the second largest consumer of the tobacco. Every third adult in rural area consumes some sort of tobacco. Every fifth adult in urban area consumes some sort of tobacco. Every seventh adult female 18 years and above consumes tobacco. So every 8th person have started using tobacco before 15 years of age. Almost 28 crore population of India consumes some sort of tobacco. Khani is the most commonly used product, followed by BD and then Gutka. And this is again the data from Gates 2 survey, which shows that almost 28.6% of the Indian adult population consumes some sort of tobacco. And this incidence is very high in the northeastern states like Tripura, Mizoram, Manipur, Assam, Meghalaya, Nagaland, where almost 40 to 60% of the population consumes some sort of tobacco. So 27% of all cancers in India are related to tobacco. We have the highest number of oral cancers worldwide because of the use of smokeless tobacco. Then we have the highest risk in the northeastern region, followed by southern region. And this risk is projected to increase by 13% by 225. So what can be done to control or quit or stop tobacco? So as Dr. Gopala mentioned that there are several modifiable risk factors, including are able to control or reduce the risk of cancers. So it has been seen that cigarette smoking is one of the major risk factors, and by controlling cigarette smoking or stopping cigarette smoking, we can reduce almost 20% of the cancer. But this task is very difficult because of certain barriers, and we will let you know. First major barrier is that tobacco industry is a major source of revenue in our country. So projections for the 218 and 19 was that almost 34,830 crores of revenue was generated from cigarette industry only, and it was almost to 35,600 crores. So this is actually very difficult to stop because this is a major source of revenue, and no government will immediately put a stop on this tobacco production. Second, tobacco industries are a major source of employment. Almost 35 lakhs people are involved with tobacco farming in India. 45 lakhs are associated with BD manufacturing, and a total of 4.57 crore earn their livelihood from tobacco. So we cannot snatch their livelihood at a one go immediately. This is absolutely very, very difficult. Thirdly, the huge political support for this tobacco industry. Many of these tobacco industries are owned by many politicians, and they are of the opinion that there is no medical evidence that BDs cause cancer. This is the irony of this country. Second, fourth one, like poor awareness, which is linked to very poor education. that we are not able to control the use of tobacco in our country. And then the role of these so-called role models. So these are the major force behind the adolescent and young generation who are now moving towards these tobacco products. Then what can be done? How to quit tobacco? So first of all, main important point is that we have to raise awareness regarding the use of tobacco by means of mass awareness programs right at the level of school and colleges. We have to discourage children and young adults from imitating actors promoting these tobacco and tobacco products. Secondly, we have to discourage active smokers. We have to educate them to take medical help for quitting tobacco. Heavy smokers, yes, they find it difficult because of the addictive effect of nicotine, but strong willpower and medical support can lead to discontinuation of tobacco. Then something at the government level can be done by strong legislation, like reinforcement of existing laws, like banning of all advertisement of tobacco products. Sale of tobacco to minors should be banned with heavy penalty. Smoking in public places should be prohibited with heavy penalty. And similarly, the sale within 100 yards of education institute should be banned immediately. Then there should be a price regulation by putting a heavy tax on tobacco products, then elimination of subsidies to tobacco industries. Then there should be gradual switching to alternate crop farming from tobacco farming to the farmers, and this support should be provided in a gradual manner to them. Then again, banning addition of flavoring substances like menthol, sugars, elaichi, and clove to the tobacco products. And I'm showing some of the scary photographs of our patients who developed oral cancers after consuming tobacco and tobacco-related products. These are the various advanced stage malignancies. And I think nothing is impossible in this world. And with a strong determination, we and you together can stop and control both tobacco as well as cancer. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Deepak. I invite next speaker, Dr. Swasti. She will be speaking on HPV and cancer. Dr. Swasti is a consultant oncogynecologist in Max Group of Hospitals in Delhi and NCR. Dr. Swasti, please share your screen.
I hope it's visible, sir.
No, yeah, your slides are just visible. Please put it on slideshow.
Yeah. So good evening and thank you to the organizers, Dr. Amit, Dr. Sweety, and of course the Journal of Carcinogenesis, Dr. Gopala, for this opportunity. Today is World Cancer Day, as all our dignitaries have mentioned, and I'm given the responsibility to talk about HPV and cervical cancer. As you just heard Dr. Gopala talk about the incidence of cervical cancer and the Indian data and the global data, and human papilloma virus as a main causative factor in cervical cancers. So this is where the cervix lies. You know, very often when women are asked what is cervical cancer, do you know about cervical cancer? So most of them will say that, cervical cancer is a cancer of the neck. So this is not a cancer of the neck or a bony area. This is a cancer of the neck of the womb. So it's the lower part of the uterus where this cancer lies. And that is the picture, the world global picture. Cervix uteri, the lower part of the uterus, causing 6.5% contribution to the total number of new cases. This is Globocan 2020 data. Now look at this, when you compare to what has happened to cervical cancer in the last 2 years, when you looked at Globocan 2018 vis-a-vis 2020 data, there has been a marginal increase, though the incidence of cervical cancer in the last decade has reduced slightly because of a massive awareness campaign that's been taken by the scientists, by the healthcare providers, by oncologists, by the medical fraternity, and the involvement of common people into understanding how cervical cancer is caused. So similar picture when you look at world incidence of the 8 standardized incidence and the death rates because of the cancers of the cervix. So now what's happening in India? In India, we have about 61,000 deaths every year because of cervical cancer. We are losing 185 women every day to this deadly disease, 8 women every hour, and a woman every 8 minutes. So that's the magnitude of cervical cancer in India. And of course, in the US, because they have a robust screening program, they're still losing 13,000 women with cervical cancer every year. So, whatever figures we are seeing is all tip of the iceberg. There's a major challenge to be met. And of course, we can do it, we will do it. So when you look at the incidence of cervical cancer, what is the age group? What is the age that women are more likely to have cervical cancer? The highest incidence is actually looked at is between the age groups of 40 to 64. So, because it takes a while to develop cervical cancer. So is cervix the only cancer that's happening by this virus? No. So there are a lot of cancers which are happening by the human papilloma virus, and they peak at various incidences. So if you look at cervical cancer, it will peak somewhere around 45 to 49 years of age. The other cancers are cancers of the vulva, that is the outer part, the external genitalia, of the vagina, of the anal area, and the oropharynx as well. So you looked at a lot of head and cancer patients being shown by Dr. Deepak. So a lot of, there's a variety of orosexual practices all across the globe. And of course, human papilloma virus does cause more than cervical cancer. It does cause warts, does cause penile cancers, head and neck cancers. So it's not only women, it's the men too who need to be addressed. And if you look at the global data, the annual HPV related diseases in men, the penile cancers is just the tip of the iceberg. They will have a lot of genital warts and head and neck cancers. Whereas women, if you look at it, they will have very low grade cervical dysplasias and high grade cervical dysplasias topping the list, followed by frank invasive cervical malignancies. And then you see a lot of genital warts happening, especially in the adolescent group. So more than 99% of the cervical cancer is caused by the human papilloma virus. So if you look at what is HPV, this is a molecular structure of the genome of the virus. And there are various kinds of viruses. That means there are some low risk viruses like type 6 and type 11. There are about hundreds kinds of viruses. So the high risk are the ones like 16 and 18, and about 13 are the viruses which are actually causing cancer and precancers. So you will see the low risk viruses causing more anogenital warts. So non-cancer causing type will be the low risk types like 6 and 11. So HPV is a common virus which spreads primarily through sexual transmission, though you can have non-sexual modes of transmission as well. So it can cause the growth of abnormal cells on a woman's cervix. As you have seen Dr. Gopala telling you how cancer is caused. And if left untreated, these abnormal cells, once this virus causes persistent infection, these cells actually, the changes can lead to a cancer, which does take a while to happen. So if you look at what are the kinds of high risk viruses, I talked about 16 and 18, and there are many other kinds like 31, 33, 35, 45, 52, and 58. So there's a multitude of, there's a span of viral strains of HPV which is causing cancer. So if you look at India alone, about 82.7% of invasive cervical cancers are attributable to the 16 and 18 types. And that forms the basis of further testing and screening, which I'm going to talk about. So again, this, you look at adult women, they're quite at risk of HPV, and the span of HPV infection is highest between 25 to 50 years of age. So when I say HPV infection, it's a little early. So we were saying that younger women have a better immunity, so they will have latent infection. That means they will have a transient infection, which their immune system clears off. But women over 30 were considered to have more higher chances of persistent HPV infections. Now the cutoff is being reduced to 25 years. You will see a lot of persistent infections happening in much younger women now. So it all depends on the immune system. So look at HPV alone, it causes about 30 million low-grade lesions, 30 million genital warts, 10 million high-grade lesions, in 300 million, it will cause no abnormality. So what we are seeing as cervical cancer is only a tip of the iceberg. There's a lot to be unearthed, and that's what I meant when I said tip of the iceberg. So the latent HPV virus is there. It's not integrating with the host genome, and like Dr. Gopala said, that there's everything what's happening is at a genomic level. It's happening in our genes. It's happening in the epigenome. So when the virus is quietly staying there, not producing any lesions, it's just there. Women are asymptomatic, there's a transient infection, it just gets cleared off. The problem happens when there's persistence of this infection. It's get integrated with the host genome, and that starts causing lesions. And initially these lesions will be not not by far very infective lesions, and they will lead to certain abnormal enlargement of the nucleus of the cell, and then some more changes over a period of months to years, and it will form various stages of pre-cancer, which you can see here as CIN 1, 2 and 3, low grade lesions, high grade lesions. And it takes about 15 to 18 years in a normal immune individual or a woman to have invasive cancer. So I would say cervical cancer is 100% preventable. There is a large window of opportunity which we can utilize to our advantage, and definitely to save our women from this deadly disease. So, and you will also see here that many of them will regress on their own. So that means once a woman develops pre-cancer, then she's totally treatable. So even if we catch a lesion at its pre-cancerous stage, you can totally treat it, completely get rid of it. So it, because there is a lot of time, it takes years to decades to form cancer, you have a lot of opportunity. And when I say it's 100% preventable, I mean that there is the opportunity to vaccinate even before sexual activity. That is best at 11 to 13 years of age, and it is best to do a screening. That means a woman is healthy, she has no symptoms, and she just needs to go and get a regular check done. That means she needs to do pap smears, HPV testing, and this opportunity lies at a very wide range. So earlier it was 21, and we say now it's 25 to 65. And main thing is education and awareness. Now in the last 10 to 12 years, I've realized that women are asking, they're coming and seeking for a pap smear. So there's definitely a change, but there's more to contribute. So what are the kinds of vaccine which are available? In India, we have two kinds of vaccine, bivalent and quadrivalent. And of course, like the US has the 9 strain vaccine, we are going to have that very soon in India as well, maybe a couple of months. That protects you against 2 strains of low risk viruses and 7 strains of high risk viruses. Okay. So, if you have a 9-valent vaccine, that's going to be most effective against development of this virus. And as I said, that you vaccinate your preteens, you vaccinate them between 11 to 13 year age. Now, in many countries like Australia, they've been doing this as a part of the school health campaign and the awareness campaign. And they have been vaccinating the preteen boys also, not only girls. But in India at the moment, because of regulatory considerations, we are only vaccinating our adolescent girls. So why at between 11 to 13? That's the time where their immune system is developing. They have a lower risk of exposure. They're sexually naive. It's more effective. You have more opportunity to vaccinate these preteens. And they only need 2 doses to vaccinate before 15 years of age. So if you're vaccinating between 9 to 15, you only need 2 doses 6 to 12 months apart. But if you're vaccinating over 15 years, you need 3 doses. So we're also looking at data where we could reduce it to 1 dose or 2 dose. That will take some time, but of course, if you vaccinate, it's not 100% efficacy. You still can prevent cervical cancer 7 out of 10 times. That means it has a 70% efficacy. So what do you do for the rest 30%? You screen them. So whenever we vaccinate the girls, we educate them, and we educate their parents. If you are educating, preteens is not easy. So we educate their parents, counsel them that, this girl has got vaccinated. The moment, she starts sexual activity or over 21 or within 2 years of marriage, you please bring her. We start doing regular screenings, and we educate them that all women who are vaccinated still need to continue to be screened. And Delhi, in fact, became the first state in India to implement the HPV vaccination program in the school arena, and followed by Tamil Nadu and, of course, many other states. So this is the dose schedule that I was talking about. So if you give before the 15th birthday, you can do a 2-dose series, 6 to 12 months apart. And if you give it after 15 years, you need to do a 3-shot, 0, 1 to 2, and 6 months, depending on which vaccine you're using, bivalent or quadrivalent. And of course, over 26, see, once the sexual activity is initiated, the 70% efficacy is not actually 70%. It's definitely reduced because the system is already exposed to the virus. So definitely it has to be a shared clinical decision making between the woman and the healthcare providers. And over 45 years, I wouldn't never recommend vaccinating by the HPV vaccine. I would say stick to, if you've lost the opportunity to get yourself vaccinated, vaccinate your girls. But for yourself, I will tell all the women who come to my outpatients to get a regular pap smear and an HPV testing done. And the recommendation definitely is to screen women before the appearance of symptoms to detect cancers early. And when you detect cancers early in stage 1, we talk about cure. We talk about a more than 90% survival rate, a 90% 5-year survival, vis-a-vis a late detection of cancer where the survival rates drop to 10 to 15 to 20%. So what are the risk factors for cervical cancer? I talked about persistent HPV infection. And there are other sexually transmitted diseases like syphilis, gonorrhea, chlamydia, multiple sexual partners. Very often I see women coming with persistent discharges, persistent infections, not getting treated, not, amenable to treatment or not compliant to treatment. And those chronic infections somehow will lead to a lot of precancerous changes. Early initiation of sexual activity. We used to have a lot of early marriages in this part of the continent, and age less than 17 years at pregnancy, or a very early sexual activity, many pregnancies, multiparity, where the immune system is immunocompromised, like post-transplant, they're on steroids, HIV, smoking, Dr. Deepak showed how tobacco could be a multiplier to a cervical cancer apart from all other cancers in the body. So of low socioeconomic status. So these are the kind of situations where you would see more cervical cancer. And many women, when I tell them get yourself screened, they say we don't have symptoms. So let me tell you, most of the times women with early cancers may not have symptoms at all. So don't wait for symptoms to come. Any abnormal vaginal bleeding between periods, after intercourse, or after menopause definitely has to be dealt with a pinch of salt. You need to seek specialist advice. Periods, if they become heavy, they last longer than usual, they come early, that should not be treated as a normal sign of menopause. Any vaginal discharge which is in smelly, which is watery, persistent, any color, or associated with pelvic pain, pain during intercourse, feeling of some pressure, heaviness in the pelvic area, should not be treated or neglected. So it should be dealt with, it should not be ignored. And when the disease becomes advanced and spreads, so cancer has the ability to spread, and that's why it's cancer. Otherwise it would be a benign tumor, like Dr. Kopala said. So fatigue, weight loss, bone pain, fractures, this could be a sign of late disease. We do see women with advanced cervical cancers presenting in fistulas. That means there's an abnormal communication between the urinary bladder to the vagina, or to the stool passage to the vagina, and that could lead to a lot of discomfort and distress and poor quality of life. So let's pledge that we will not let our women reach that stage. And these are the 10 warning signs of cervical cancer I just mentioned. So what is a pap smear? I'm talking about pap smear screening, HPV testing. So we just examine the women in the OPD by a speculum, and we just take the cells through a brush. And there are two ways of doing it. Either we just spread them on a slide or send them on a liquid. The better way is to send them in a liquid, because you can do the HPV testing as well. So any woman over 25 years, we recommend an HPV testing also. I'm primarily utilizing co-testing in India. But of course, a primary HPV testing is very important, because a woman, if HPV negative and a clinical examination is normal, is unlikely likely to develop cervical cancer in the next 5 years if she's not symptomatic, if her clinical examination is normal. So this can find abnormal changes in the cervix, and it should begin 2 to 3 years within the first sexual activity. All women should do this, and schedule your pap test. No intercourse in the last 24 to 48 hours, no use of tampons, douching, and it should be done post-menstrually. But if you need to repeat a pap test because of some infection or something, then wait for 3 months at least. Don't do them too soon. And this is what I was saying. Either spread them on a slide or send them in this liquid with the tip of the brush immersed. And if there's an abnormality on the pap smear, we do not leave the patients. We examine them under the microscope, and it's called as a colposcopy, and we apply some vinegar and which is acetic acid, and look at under magnification to understand where to biopsy from. And a biopsy doesn't spread cancer. So the very common myth that we deal with, and I'm sure most of my colleagues also do, is that when you do a biopsy, it is going to spread cancer if there's cancer. So no, it doesn't. It just diagnoses cancer, helps us to treat cancer early. And I think getting tested for HPV and is the key time. This is the time when you need to just get up and walk into a clinic and say, get me tested for HPV. And when do we stop screening women? At 65? If in the last 10 years their 3 smears are normal and they're HPV negative, then we can just stop screening. And if they've had a uterus removal for any reason, there was no precancer, no cancer on the biopsy, then we can stop. Otherwise, screening schedules remain normal, similar to women who've been vaccinated or not vaccinated. If you've got yourself vaccinated, fine, great, wonderful, but don't stop screening is the message today. So the speculum just separates the vaginal walls. We clean the cervix, we look under the microscope and do a biopsy by using an acetic acid. It doesn't spread cancer. So I would say 6 things that you can do right now to prevent cervical cancer is get a regular pap smear and HPV test, limit the amount of sexual partners, quit smoking, avoid secondhand smoke. If somebody else is smoking around you, you're as much as high risk of developing cancer as the person himself. If you're sexually active, use good sexual hygiene, use a condom, barrier methods, follow up the abnormal pap smears according to your specialist advice, and get the vaccine too. So I would say see your doctor regularly. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Swasti. I now invite, last but not least, speaker, Dr. Sweety Gupta, who is assistant professor in the Department of Radiation Oncology at All India Institute of Medical Science, Radiation Oncology from Rishikesh. So she will be enlightening us on screening and early detection of cancer. Dr. Sweety Gupta, please share your screen. Dr. Sweety Gupta. So Dr. Sweety is not able to share her screen. Just wait for 1 minute. We are looking into this snap.
Dr. Sweety Gupta, are you speaking yet?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, now you are. Thank you.
Yeah. Good evening, all. So after the speakers, everybody has given a wonderful presentation. Dr. Gopala regarding the incidence of cancer and an overview. Dr. Deepak about the tobacco and cancer. Dr. Swasti about the HPV and cervical cancer. I have been given the responsibility to speak about cancer, the early detection and screening. Now, already the incidence has been conveyed by all the speakers, and the data are alarming that there are now 19 million new cases and 9.9 million cancers death annually. And even the International Agency for Research on Cancer, it estimates that 1 in 5 men or 1 in 6 women worldwide will develop cancer over the course of their lifetime, and 1 in 8 men and 1 in 11 women will die from their disease. So this data is again an alarming one. Now, this is the Globacon data. It has already been shown by the previous speakers. It is just to make everybody known that the incidence of cancer is on the rise and it is in millions now. This is the world data, and this is the Indian data, which includes both genders, and in which the female, the breast tops was, if we take both the genders, it is the lip and the oral cavity, which is the topmost in the India. Now, what are the main risk factors? The most significant risk factor is age. According to the researcher Robert A. Weinberg, if we live longer, sooner or later, we all would get cancer. Smoking is the single most preventable cause of cancer in death in the world, and around a third of the tobacco causes death are really due to cancer. Alcohol is drinking is estimated to be the 6% causes of death worldwide, and around 1 in 8 are due to cancer. Even the overweight and obesity is considered to be a risk factor, as has already been narrated by Dr. Gopala, and it is more common in the middle income countries. Infections also take a bigger chunk of global cancer burden, like HPV, Dr. Swasti has already narrated, also including the hepatitis B and hepatitis C virus infections for the liver malignancies. Even if the patients have received prior radiation is also a cause of cancer. Suppose the patient has been treated for Hodgkin's lymphoma to the chest, so the females are prone to get breast cancer, or those persons who are having an exposure to the ultraviolet radiation. This causes a skin cancer, which is more common in the Western countries. Now, the causes of cancer are enormous. There are multifactorial disease. It's not a one cause which is causing cancer. It might be environmental factors, the dietary factors, the occupational factors, infections, and all these include and are called as carcinogens. Genetic factors take a very small portion of cancers. Pain of the chunk is the sporadic cancers, which are not related to the acquired during their lifetime and not through their inherited through their families. Now, what are the warning signs of cancer? This everybody needs to know what are the warning signs of cancer. It is told mainly mentioned by a name, mnemonic caution, changes in bowel or bladder habit, a sore that does not heal, unusual bleeding or discharge. T stands for thickening or lump in the breast or elsewhere. I stands for indigestion or difficulty in swallowing. O is the obvious changes in warts or moles. N is a nagging cough or hoarseness of voice. So it is named as a mnemonic called, we can see here, it is caution. Now, coming to what are the stages of cancer? It starts from a very small localized primary tumor with later on spreading to an adjacent structures, and then it leads to the spread to the other parts of the body if left untreated, or if it is ignored, or patients do not seek a medical help. And later on, when the burden of cancer increases in the body, that it overweighs the rest of the body, it leads to death. So this is how the stages of cancer and how the cancer progresses in the body. If we go through the top global causes of death, after the cardiovascular diseases, the neoplasm is the 17.1% of the deaths of global cancer. This is a worrisome status. And what might be the reason for this? The reason is that many people usually are not aware of the key signs and symptoms. They think that if they are having some symptom, it might be due to any other infection, or they will wait they will be treating, getting infection. Suppose patient is having a lung lesion, they will be treated for tuberculosis, they will be taking medication for the tuberculosis, or if they are having some lump, they will take on antibiotic. So by the time the symptoms or signs are progressed, they do not are able to take, or they have a knowledge of their symptoms or symptom appraisal. And many people are so much worried about cancer, and they have so much of social stigma that they avoid going to the doctor for as long as possible until it becomes for them a big problem and it goes out of a curable stage. So these delays in cancer, what does it lead to? First is that when the cancer goes in advanced stages, it decreases the chances of survival. It decreases the chances of survival. The treatment morbidity also increases, because suppose the patient comes to us in an early stage, then we can treat the patient by one modality, because it might be surgery, it might be radiation, it might be chemotherapy. But when the patient comes to us in an advanced stages, we have to increase, the management becomes a multimodality treatment. So the morbidity of the treatment from the treatment is also more. Third thing is that when you add the number of modalities in the treatment, when the modalities are increased, then the cost of care also increases. So these are the problems which occur with delaying cancer care. So what is the solution? There are so many problems going on. Question arises, can cancer be prevented? Now the WHO estimates that 50 to 75% of the cancers are related to the personal habits. As already has been narrated by Dr. Deepak, the tobacco causes a major portion of the cancer. And in fact, tobacco is not only the cause of head and neck cancer, but apart from that, it is a cause of esophageal, the lung cancer, the pancreatic, the stomach malignancy also. Second thing is that mostly are as a result of exposure to the modifiable risk factors. Now, the modifiable risk factors are those risk factors which it is in our hand if we can modify this risk factor. Suppose smoking, it is up to us. We can quit smoking, we can stop smoking. We should not smoke in our life. Alcohol, we should do that. We should not take alcohol, or there is a limit up to which the alcohol can be taken. So similarly, these are modifiable. The unmodifiable risk factors are, suppose a person has a family history of a malignancy and he inherits the risk of having a cancer. So that is an unmodifiable risk factor. So, but most of the cancer are modifiable risk factors. So this is in our hand if we can take care of these risk factors. And most of the cancers have a long pre-detectable preclinical phase. As Dr. Swasti had shown in one of the diagrams, that there is a long preclinical phase even in the HPV and cervical cancer, after which it progresses to an invasive cancer. So if we have a long preclinical phase and if we detect in that phase, the treatment of the malignancy or the tumor is very well possible. And even if it is in a precancerous condition, it can be reverted back to a normal position. Also, the WHO estimates that the 40% of the cancer deaths are preventable because of these modifiable risk factors if we take care of all these factors. So every year, million of cancer patients, they can be saved from these premature deaths and suffering if they have timely access to early detection and treatment. As is already said, and it's a quote, that prevention is always have a more weightage than cure and is always better than cure. Now, how is prevention defined? It is defined as the protection of health by personal and community-wide effort. It is that I take care of myself, and as a doctor or a physician spreads his or her word in the community. Now, what are the levels of cancer prevention? It has 4 levels. One is the primordial, second is the primary, then the secondary, and the tertiary prevention. What is primordial prevention? When we prevent the occurrence of those factors which are causes of the disease. For example, we give health education to the patient, like avoid smoking. You can have a good healthy lifestyle. You have to take adequate fruits. So that the risk factors has not been introduced into the lives of the patient before that. When we implement our health education, that is the primordial prevention. Primary prevention is that in the patients who have the risk factor, a person is smoking, I ask him or her to stop smoking. So that is tobacco cessation. Or alcohol, you limit your alcohol. If a patient is obese, we ask him for weight control. So this comes under primary prevention. Secondary prevention includes for early detection of the disease before the symptoms develop, and the screening part comes in the secondary prevention. Tertiary prevention is once the patient has developed the disease, now our main aim is to decrease the morbidity or mortality once it has been diagnosed, and the patients who have been cured by disease, we prevent the occurrence of second primary malignancies. So primordial prevention, I've already told you, it is the prevention of development of risk factors, and we encourage the people to adopt a healthy lifestyle and habits. And the main focus is on mass health education. And usually, who is the most important group in this? It is the parents, the teachers, and the peer groups, because you do not require a physician consult in that. It is all amongst ourselves. The families itself can educate each one another. Yes, you can take care of this. This is a healthy lifestyle. You should have it. And mainly the national health programs and policies like food and nutrition, discouraging smoking, alcohol, drugs, and physical activities and lifestyle are based on this primordial prevention. There's a very good quote by the Dr. Elliot Jocelyn that genes load the gun, the lifestyle pulls the trigger. Means, suppose we have a genetic risk of carrying a cancer, but if we have a poor, bad, or a wrong lifestyle, it can pull the trigger and increase the risk of malignancy. Now, what is the primary prevention of cancer includes? As we have already told, the person who have the risk factors, and then we try to control that, like tobacco control, the diet, alcohol consumption, infections, and reduction of the sunlight exposure. Now, what does the secondary prevention includes? The secondary prevention includes screening as well as early clinical diagnosis. Early clinical diagnosis is that the patients who are symptomatic, we detect them as early as possible, so that the patients who are diagnosed late, the proportion of those patients is reduced. Second is that screening, which includes the patients who are healthy, asymptomatic, and we identify the unrecognized disease. So there is a difference between early diagnosis and screening. Early diagnosis is on the symptomatic patients, but we diagnose or we detect the cancer early so that it is found in an initial stage and it can have a good cure rate. Screening is that patient might be having an undetectable disease and might not be having any of the symptoms, and we recognize the disease and can easily identify, or chances of acquiring later on the lifetime can be noted. Now, so this is the diagram which shows what is the difference between screening and early diagnosis. So this comes the symptom onset. This is the healthy, abnormal, the pre-invasive one. This is the invasive. So before the invasive one, when we target the population, that is called the screening. The service provided to the people after the development of symptoms is called the early diagnosis. Here, if we work for the early, here we work for the screening. Now, the steps to early diagnosis includes awareness and accessing the care. Patients should be aware of their symptoms and they should have an attitude of health-seeking behavior, that yes, I have got these symptoms and I have to seek a healthcare physician. Second is, our motive is as a physician that clinical evaluation, diagnosis, and staging. We should make a quick clinical diagnosis, staging, and patient should be immediately referred for treatment, so it gets diagnosed at an early stage. Then it is the timely access to the quality and affordable treatment, that it should be available for the patient. So because whenever the patients are diagnosed at an early stage, definitely the treatment is better, and the final result is that we get a good cure for these patients. Now, what is cancer screening? It is already explained. It is an unrecognized disease in an asymptomatic population. And how do we do that? By means of certain test, examination procedures which can be done to that target population. Now, screening, there are various organizations like ESCO, the NCC, and the ISMO, many organizations, the American Cancer Society, even the ICMR guidelines from India, they have given certain screening guidelines for variety of malignancies for average and high risk populations. Now, the average risk is any person in the population, and high risk population includes those who have either some risk factors in them. Suppose a family history, either they have a previous history of malignancy, they have a previous history of radiation, something like that. So these are considered to be high risk. So the guidelines are made for both of them. But still there is certain consensus among these guidelines for common malignancies, which are very common, as we have seen in the Globocan data, the breast, the cervix, the lung, and the prostate, and the colorectal. Here I'm just going to brief out, not detailing the cancer screening, because it depends upon the geographical region you are residing in and where the screening guidelines are being followed up. So here, what I have mentioned is usually the American Cancer Society, like breast. Breast, it includes the breast self-examination, which is done every month by the females in front of the mirror, a clinical examination, a screening mammography, and all these have, if you can see in the third column, it depends upon your age, which age, what has to be performed. It is not that you are 20 years or you're just a female, so it will be starting abruptly. It depends on each age group, which test has to be performed. Like if you see this MRI, it is not for a general and average risk. There is certain criteria for which only MRI has been asked to get for a screening. The females who are at high risk, they have a certain other criteria, like they have a different age group in which the MRI is, they are in screening mammography, and MRI is recommended for these patients. Now, similarly, cancer cervix, I'm not going to in the detail. Dr. Swasti has very beautifully explained each and everything. Pap smear cytology and the HPV testing in carcinoma cervix is the screening guideline. All these guidelines which I have mentioned here belong to the American Cancer Society. Now, the carcinoma lung also has now got a screening guideline, and usually they have a education like quitting the tobacco, using protective measures against chemicals at work, and the screening includes the low dose CT scan, so that the patients also do not have a risk of taking radiation because of the CT scan. And their risk is defined depending upon the best, it is the pack years of smoking history. The persons who are having more than 30 pack years of smoking history are considered to be in the for the screening of carcinoma lung. Similarly, for the carcinoma prostate, now carcinoma prostate is usually not an Indian disease. It's usually a disease in the Western countries, and but still we have the screening guidelines for that. Mainly, it is the blood test that is called the prostate-specific antigen assay, and a clinical digital rectal examination. Again, the age depends upon when the patient has to start with the screening. Now, the colorectal cancer, it includes, has a usually depends upon the risk category. If you have a previous history of a polyp, or you have a family history of invasive, or you yourself has a history of colorectal malignancy, it includes sigmoidoscopy, fecal occult blood test, colonoscopy, fecal DNA testing, or CT colonography. So mainly the thing is that cancer prevention, a healthy lifestyle can reduce the risk of cancer. This includes being, it is highlighted as active. So reduce dietary animal fat, stop smoking, or better, never start smoking. Eat lots of fruits and vegetables, get regular vigorous exercise, avoid obesity, and avoid UV sunlight from light from sunlight and tanning beds, and reduce animal fat. Now, when we have gathered today for this awareness, there are certain myths and facts about cancer which I would like to share with you. There is a myth that there is no answer for cancer. No, cancer is also curable at early stages. Second is that chemotherapy and radiotherapy is painful. Now there are newer techniques of radiation. The side effects have drastically reduced. And radiation is totally a painless procedure, even the chemotherapy. Biopsy causes spread of cancer? No. Biopsies are done because we need a diagnosis. A histopathological diagnosis is required, without which we cannot proceed for treatment, and it does not lead the spread. Cancer is painful, and painless lumps aren't cancerous. Pain can lead to more and more pain later, but early cancer stage is painless. Last, old age disease. Cancer is not an old age disease. It is can also occur in youngers, or in youngers, it usually presents in an aggressive form. So my take home message for today is prevention and early detection are an integral part of cancer continuum. The primary prevention, it's a form of risk reduction, is the best way to prevent decrease the morbidity and mortality related to cancer. And our education includes the exercise, the dietary habits and protection, smoking cessation, and screening practices. We all should be aware of the early warning signs of cancer, and early detection is associated with best patient outcome. So I would like to end my slide with, there is a can in the cancer because we can beat it. Thank you. Thank you for patient hearing.
So video का start होगा. So
Hello, Minju.
Dr. Gopala,
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So will you like to give some
Yes,
concluding
yes.
remarks?
I'll just give a couple of minutes worth of concluding remarks. Thank you all the speakers for your wonderful contribution and the presentations, helpful. And uh, Dr. Sundaryal, as you mentioned, tobacco is a major problem in the Indian subcontinent. Yes, the newly addicted tobacco addicted population in India is growing by 4%, whereas it is decreasing in the Western countries. So that is the key problem, because West has shunned this tobacco and East is welcoming it. A message that you guys should take to the Indian government seriously. So Dr. Swasti, your presentation HPV on target. Yes, uh, low cost screening is available with effort from Tata Memorial, pioneering effort from Tata Memorial, like you already mentioned, acetic acid, involved simple screening methodologies. So, it's important that we spread the message that screening available and it saves. Dr. Sweetie Gupta, thank you for highlighting early detection, screening, opportunities and requirements. We all spoke in one form or the other that cancer is preventable, and also Dr. Sweetie Gupta, you mentioned about diet, nutrition, all the stuff which I did too. But I just want to make one observation here. That is, with the advent of internet, we are reading and hearing a lot of advice from experts, or mostly non-experts, on what to eat or what not to eat to prevent diseases, including and especially cancer, which I think is not a very good thing, because there is no one-to-one correlation as to what causes a disease or what prevents a disease with respect to diet. So it's a holistic picture that one has to take. I think the misinformation is as dangerous as the disease itself. So I think the physicians, I think, will have to take up this as a part of their task, also to advise the patient population and general public about the misinformation. So this series of talks today are very useful. I think if anybody is interested, our organization would like to continue to have more frequent events like this one, including in other languages, Indian languages, to help the local communities. Thank you very much, Dr. Amit, for helping
Thank you, sir.
putting together.
So I would like to conclude this webinar by thanks all the speakers and all the delegates and all the participants here who have joined us and shared their precious time with us. Thank you, Dr. Gopala, for enlightening us. Thank you, Dr. Swasti, Dr. Deepak, Dr. Sweetie Gupta. And we will be moving ahead with organ-based or disease-based such webinars in the future. And on 13th of Feb, we are holding one more such webinars in association with Journal of Carcinogenesis. That will be on gallbladder cancer, which is one topic which is very close to my heart. As in Indo-Gangetic belt, we are witnessing a lot of gallbladder cancer, and presently at AIIMS Rishikesh, we are doing some pioneering research on gallbladder cancer, and I would emphasize that Journal of Carcinogenesis, which is indexed with all major indexation agencies, including PubMed and Medline, which has a very good impact factor for the last 2 years. It has got 4.063. And in the last year only, from our department, we have published 6 original articles in this esteemed journal. So I would like to sensitize my postgraduates who are part of this webinar that please try to publish your thesis or your original research work in Journal of Carcinogenesis. We are now on the editorial board of this journal. So if the article is really good one, it will be given due consideration. Thank you again. Thank you, Dr. Gopala, and all the speakers and all the participants. So we will meet again on 13th Feb. The link will be sent on everybody's mail and mobile number very soon. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Amit.